Vern, are you the same Vern Larson who used to have the outdoor event? You did that for a lot of years, didn't you?
I did it for 30-some years on a part-time basis.
Right.
I was postmaster at Lakewood, and for 30 years, and that was just a little sideline writing. That's ironic here. I brought down a clipping of my grandfather, which makes reference to Justice Jackson, and I happened to write the article on him.
Did you really?
Yeah. So.
Well, what did you write about him?
His life, trick horse he had on the stage, and his connection with Justice Jackson.
Okay. Well, tell me about the article you wrote. What did you say?
What did I think?
Yeah. What did you say about him? And
well, I brought a copy of that along, and it just made reference to the fact that he's retired, living in Lakewood. But the main reason I brought it, there's a picture of him on Justice Jackson's horse, Renee Dare.
No kidding.
Which he trained, and I noticed on the wall out here you have a number of pictures of her too.
Right.
And I was about 11 years old then, and I rode the horse. My grandfather did the groundwork.
So your grandfather's name was what?
Vern Spencer.
Vern Spencer. Mm-hmm. And how did he connect with the whole horse industry and?
Well, just he liked horses, and he lived in Sugar Grove, and he had a reputation of one who could train horses and get a lot out of them, and one thing led to another, and he ended up with a horse that was trained unusually. Mm-hmm. And he was on the stage with that horse, and along the line he met Justice Jackson. He called him Rob, and they got to be real good friends, and then he trained Renee Dare for him, and that was up at the old Lakewood Stock Farm. You're probably too young to remember the Lakewood Stock Farm.
I certainly have had a lot of people talk about it.
But you're right across from where the post office is now. Mm-hmm. And that was a hangout for everybody that liked horses. And of course, in that day and age, a lot of people had more contact with horses than they do nowadays.
Sure.
But I grew up with horses and through my grandfather, and I've always liked them. Met my wife through horses, and
really,
yeah. So that was the story. Justice Jackson, when he was still in Frewsburg, mm-hmm. And he went to as Attorney General, and then he would come home weekends, and we would ride. And Mary, she would ride with us. When he didn't come home, why then we'd go down and pick her up at their house on Fairmount Avenue, mm-hmm. with the big pillars.
Right.
And we'd pick Mary up there and go up and ride. They had 2 riding horses up at the stock farm, and then plus this colt that my grandfather trained.
What were the names of Mary? What would you remember Mary's horse's name?
One was it was a jumper, Happy Days, D-A-Z-E. Mm-hmm. And the other one, as I remember, was named Charlie, S-H-A-R-L-E-Y. But they were pleasure horses.
Pleasure horses.
He wasn't into show horses. He just liked to ride and liked pleasure horses.
Now, would Bill, the son, did he ride at all? You remember?
No, I never really knew him.
Right.
Mary was the one that was into horses, and we used to pick her up and take her up in my granddad's old Model A Ford.
Oh, kidding.
Yeah.
So it'd be your grandfather, you, and Mary. What time period would this have been?
Well, this would have been back in, before he went to Nuremberg, so it would have been back around 1940, along in there.
So he was in Washington. He was on the Supreme Court. He
was Attorney General first.
Right.
And then he was appointed to the Supreme Court after that.
So, okay.
Then he ended up in Germany at the Nuremberg trials. Incidentally, there was a good program, you probably saw it, on, maybe it was the History Channel. It covered the Nuremberg trials. Mm-hmm. It was very interesting. I happened to catch that.
So when you would go with your grandfather to the Lakewood stock barn there, what would your grandfather normally have you do?
Ride horseback.
So you were the one that would kind of exercise them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to go up after school, and I was probably in, I don't know, I must have been 9 or 10 years old then. Mm-hmm. And I exercised 2 horses after school up the stock farm. I'd go up and ride them, and there was a half-mile track which is now runs into where Cherry Lane is.
Mm-hmm.
That was up there, and that was where we would exercise the horses up there.
So tell me about how was the barn set up? Do you recall the number of stalls, and then of course there was this track outside?
Yeah, the track was up. You couldn't see that from the barn. It was a half-mile track,
Mm-hmm.
and the barn itself. How can I explain it? You'd come into a lot in the front and go into the barn. It ran parallel to Fairmount Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
and before you get to Winch Road, it was in that section.
Mm-hmm.
From Cherry Lane to Winch Road, and of course Cherry Lane wasn't there at the time.
Right.
And then there was, I'm only guessing, there was probably 10 or 12 stalls. And then there was an L shape in the back, and that had places where you could have cattle with stanchions in.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that L shape, there was a fence around it, and that was a little exercise ring right attached to the barn. They called that the paddock.
Right.
And then there was a lane that went right up to the track, and that's where they rented horses there. There was quite a business going in those days. People would rent horses, and then they could go up on that track and ride.
Right.
Or you could go out a gate on the track, on the end of the track on the west end, and get onto the Winch Road,
Mm-hmm.
which you know where that is.
Right.
That's where we live now, on the top of the hill, the Winch Road. But that was just a dirt road then.
Mm-hmm.
And when you'd get up across Baker Street and going toward Cowing Road, it was nothing but a path.
Really.
In fact, going up that hill, it was so bad sometimes from a wash out from rain that we had to lead the horses up. But that's where we would ride, and that's where we would ride with Justice Jackson and his daughter.
Now, normally those would occur on weekends.
That's when he would get home.
Right.
That was the main theme, was on weekends. Saturdays and Sundays were always at the stock farm.
Right.
But I would go up during the week after school, and it was a hangout place for me. But there was horses, and that was my love.
Who was in charge of the Lakewood stock barn? Was there an individual who really ran it?
Yeah, there was a colored fellow named Pelly Neal,
Mm-hmm.
and he ran the stock farm in those days. And as I recall, Jackson and Crawford Barger were co-owners of the stock farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess it ended up with Crawford Barger owned him. He was sole owner.
Mm-hmm.
And then it eventually passed on to a fellow named Clyde Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And Clyde was there for a number of years, and eventually it just folded up. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what year that was when it ended functions, but the rental business, that kind of died out.
Right.
And people didn't board horses like they did years before, so it's just one of those things that eased itself out of the picture.
When you would go on rides on a weekend, Saturday, Sunday, where was your destination? You mentioned
We would go maybe ride to Sugar Grove and back.
Mm-hmm.
Those back roads up there is where we rode most of the time. I would ride down in the village sometime to where we lived on West Summit, and I would ride down to my house and show my folks the horse and
Sure.
so on.
Would you ride one of Mary's horses when on these rides?
Yeah, I could ride their horse. I never took Renee Dare out. She was kind of special, and my granddad was training her.
Mm-hmm.
So I never took her out on the road unless they were along.
Right.
And then the article points out here, when he was in Germany, nobody else was on Renee's back.
All right.
He didn't allow anyone else to ride her after we had her trained, and he took her to Virginia. He was the only one who rode her.
So after you got back from Nuremberg, is that when the Rinty was shipped to Virginia?
Yes, as I remember, that's when she was sent down there.
Yeah. So you would actually, or it was in Lakewood until after the Nuremberg trial.
As I recall, yeah.
Yeah.
I was, well, let me think, how old was I?
46 is the end of the trial.
Yeah, I was in the service then, so I don't remember exactly what happened there. And then my granddad got old, and he eventually passed away, and that was in 1966
Right.
that he died.
So your grandfather, now was your dad interested in this at all?
Just as a bystander, just because I was interested in it, but he never rode horseback. He wasn't into that.
So it was you and your grandfather, special bonding.
Yep. I was the first boy to come along in the family. He had 3 daughters, and I was the first grandson. So he took me under his wing, and that was how we started our association.
I'm visualizing the Sunday morning where you go to the horse barn, and the horses would be saddled up. I assume Justice Jackson would not be saddling the horses.
Oh no, he took part in all
Oh,
that.
did he?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it was a place for him to let his hair down from the rigors of Washington.
Right.
You know, he would come there and forget all his problems in Washington and all he had to think about, and just enjoy himself. And of course, he had a great love for horses.
Oh, sure. Did he curry the horses? Did you see all that?
Oh yeah, he would brush and he'd take part in it. You didn't have to treat him with kid gloves at all. He was part of the gang when he was up there.
Do you remember any specific anecdotes or incidents with Jackson and you and your grandfather?
Oh, not really. When Renee Dare was a colt, my grandfather started training her when she was 18 months old, which is very young to start a colt. And she was too young for an adult to ride her. So when we started training her, I did the riding. I was, I think, 10 or 11 years old then. I did the riding, and my granddad did the groundwork. And that's how we broke her to saddle.
So he'd have the lunge line, and then you'd go around?
Yeah, my granddad had a lot of things he did for training horses. He had a lot of little tricks of his own. And he would train them so they weren't afraid of anything. Yeah, for example, when I'd be on its back, he'd give me an umbrella, and I'd open and close the umbrella and quiet the horse down, keep it from shining. There was little things. He had a horse. He lived in Sugar Grove, or grew up in Sugar Grove. My mother grew up in Sugar Grove. And he had a horse that was quite well known around town. It was the one that he eventually had on the stage. It was called Farmer Bob. And that horse was broke, so my grandmother or he could take the horse to town without any lines on it, with no reins or anything. It would take commands just from where he held a whip. And they called it, what'd they call that? They called that working under the whip. And if he'd move the whip to the left, why the horse would turn to the left. If he'd go this way, it would turn to the right. And if he put the whip up in the air like that, the horse would stop. And that's the way he guided the horse through town without any reins on it.
No kidding.
It was the talk of the town there many, many years ago.
So, again, I'm visualizing a Sunday morning where Justice Jackson calls to the barn and says, "Hey, we want to ride today, and we'll be up." And did you recall did he have a driver? Did he drive up by himself?
I don't remember him being chauffeured up.
Yeah.
I think I think he came home to forget about all that.
And normally on a Sunday morning trip, would it be you, your grandfather? How many people would be in a party that would go for the ride?
Well, there would just be probably Mary and he and my granddad and I. They had a little pony that I rode a lot up there named Buster, a little spotted pony, and that was theirs. And I used to ride. I was a little kid then, and I rode Buster a lot.
Also, as you're heading towards Sugar Grove, I'm trying to think of the route there. You go under which?
We're right out Big Tree Road.
Okay.
The way we'd go usually up to the end of Winch Road, and then you'd have to go across Cowing Road and get on the Big Tree Sugar Grove Road, and that's the way we'd usually ride.
And you go all the way to Sugar Grove?
Sometimes we would. It was a nice day, and we'd get a good start. We'd take our time, and we didn't go out and run the horses. They walked, and we enjoyed the ride.
It was pretty casual?
Oh, very much so.
Was that an English riding horse, or was it Western?
No, it's all English.
All English?
Yeah, we didn't ride Western at all then. I did later, but at that time it was all English. And Greenie was broken to what they call walk trot.
Mm-hmm.
She could walk and trot, but she wasn't 5-gaited.
Right.
She was strictly, he had her for a pleasure horse, and that's the way he used her.
Was it a certain breed?
No, just standard bred.
Standard bred?
It was a bay, brown with black mane and tail. Beautiful horse. I got a couple pictures in here that
I'd be anxious to see it.
are good. Show her off a little bit for her beauty.
Yeah. Did Jackson ride again, I'm thinking English, did he have an English riding outfit, or was he pretty casual in his...
No, he'd usually wear jodhpurs, riding pants and boots, riding boots. Otherwise, it was just casual.
Yeah. Did Mary have the wonderful black hat and all that?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. She was pretty casual too.
Was she? And she would have been a little bit older than you?
Yes.
Yeah.
She just passed away, just 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, 1999.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Mrs. Jackson riding?
Very little. She did ride, but she didn't seem to be involved in that too much when I was a kid.
Right.
They don't, probably more so when they set their farm up down in Virginia.
Did you ever see Jackson come back here at all after he went, the horses went, and after the war? Did you recall?
Not that I remember, no.
So all this activity that you're talking about is really when he was Attorney General and Supreme Court Justice. Yep.
Mostly before he was Supreme Court Justice. And he got into that, and of course his time was really limited then.
Right.
And for his time to come home was something that he wasn't able to do very often.
Right. Did Mary ride during that time period, or did...
Yeah, she rode, as I recall.
Yeah.
She was always there and available. She probably went to school. I just don't remember the circumstances there.
I noticed you have a couple letters here from Justice Jackson to your grandfather. I'd love to have you talk about that. One of these letters is dated, postmarked, October 5th, 1941. So he would have just gotten onto the Supreme Court. And it's addressed to Dear Vern. My wife says, you just sent me the beautiful picture of Renee to make me homesick. If so, you're darn near succeeded. I wish I could be there if they're to ride with you. The days here are still beautiful, and I go often for walks in the woods with a coach dog that has been given to us. But so far I have no horse here. There's been so many other things to do first, whether to bring one down a long trip and then be without one in the summer, or to get one here, I have not decided. If you can get away anytime for a few days, come down and look over this crazy town and stay out with us. The country here is great, and the horses and dogs plentiful. Thanks for the picture. Best wishes. Sincerely yours, Rob. I don't think I've ever seen him ever sign just Rob.
My granddad always, that's how he referred to him, as Rob. And then I noticed in the other letter, he signed that Bob.
Yeah, that's terrific.
But I always remembered him as Rob.
Yeah, I think that's really special. And then we got one January 1949, which he sends his regrets regarding Vern's passing of your grandmother. I often think of you. Mary was with me over Christmas, and we talked of you several times. She has 2 fine boys, and one of them is old enough to show a distinct liking for horses. The mare behaves beautifully. She does not go sideways. I have showed her in a couple of local shows, and she makes a beautiful appearance. The greatest difficulty is to find time enough to give her as much riding as she ought to have, for I do not let anybody else on her. During all the times I was in Germany, she ran in the lot and does not have a scar or a blemish on her. I do not know what to tell you about the road, with the bad transportation during the war and then being away in Germany and tied up so much since I got back. I'm completely out of touch with things there and do not even know who the supervisor and highway superintendent of Bustye are. Fitch used to be the county superintendent, but I do not know whether he is living or whether he could give you any help on it. A fellow that I think could give you some advice on it would be Gainey, for he knows nearly everybody in that neck of the woods. Why don't you drop in the post office and talk with him about it? I assume that's Theo Gainey's husband?
It wouldn't have been Charlie. There was a Gainey that was postmaster, and I don't know if they were related or not.
Now that I look at it, probably spelled differently.
Yeah, Gainey's, they spelt theirs, Charlie Gainey and Carly and Theo spelt theirs, I think, Ganey.
This is interesting. Another fellow that I would think of is Jerry Herrick, who used to ride up there at the farm. I am told that he is practicing law at Falconer, but he used to be an attorney for the village at Lakewood in the town of Bustine, and he knows the ropes. He spelled Falconer.
I noticed that. I wondered if they did spell it that way at one time.
I'm the attorney for Falconer, and I'll ask. Interesting. Faulkner.
There's a few errors in the.
Yeah. I'm sure he'd be glad to be of any help he could. If you see either of them, say hello for me. I certainly hope you can get the thing straightened out, and if I get up during the summer, I'll come around and see you, and perhaps we can put in a day or so fishing in Chautauqua Lake. Best wishes, sincerely yours, Bob. What a hoot. Now, do you have any idea what your grandfather was talking about?
No, I don't know. He must have had a complaint about something.
Yeah, something in the town.
Concerning the roads.
Yeah.
The only thing we could think, his home was on South Main Street, just above Prather. And to get to his house, you had to drive down like a road, I suppose you'd call it, a dead ended down, and there's a couple of houses down there.
Right.
And I just wonder if the city maintained that road, and he might have had a complaint about the way they were maintaining it. That's the only thing we could think.
Well, I think that's interesting to write a letter of the justice to a justice of the Supreme Court to complain about.
Complain about local road problems. That's what I said to my wife. I said, yeah, she's going through the mill all right.
And he responded. It was amazing. And the other thing that he mentions in his letter is he talks about Rennie. Is it Rainey?
Rennie Dare.
Rennie, I gotta get that right. Rennie Dare. That during the time he was in Germany, that she ran in the lot. What would that mean?
We probably had a little pasture,
Just
a little fenced-in area, I would imagine, yeah.
And does not have a scar or a blemish on her, so the other horses didn't kick her. Or...
No, and she didn't get hurt out in the pasture. I suppose he kept it pretty clean. That's like down in Lexington, Kentucky. If we used to go down there a lot, and you go to those pastures, those Calumet farms and those places. The pastures are absolutely beautiful. They're nicer than our lawn. There's not a stone in them.
Right.
And that's probably what he had on his farm down there in Virginia, probably. Did
your grandfather ever go down there?
Not that I know of. I don't believe he ever did.
Right.
He wasn't a great traveler, and I don't believe he did go down there.
Mm-hmm.
He loved to fish and hunt, and of course horses, and that was his passion, was horses.
Right.
It got to be mine too.
When did you have your last horse?
Well, that would have had to be, trying to think when we built the house up on the Winch Road. We lived down in Lakewood, and when we built the house up there, we had to get rid of the horses, and we had 2 horses then, and that we've been up there 50 years.
Right.
So that would have been back in the 50s probably.
Sure.
Would have been, I would guess it would have been toward the end of the 50s.
Were there other kids that were up at the stable at the time? Do you recall any of the other?
Yeah, I buddied around with Mike Hine.
Mm-hmm.
They've been running that picture of he and Carol Lou. I don't know if you knew them.
No.
Carol Lou Hine. But Mike, his father was into horses, Cliff Hines, and so Mike and I were same age, went to school together.
Right.
We palled around. And there was other ones that hung around up there. A stock farm attracts people like an old soda bar used to, you know.
Right.
But he stops in if they ride horses, fine. If they don't, they stop in the kibitz. And that was kind of the fun of it. And Pelly Neal, when he ran the barn, why he was great with everybody. Everybody liked him.
Where did he come from? Do you know?
Pelly?
Yeah.
I don't know. His daughter, I know his daughter used to come and visit him once a year. She'd come, and she was a very striking woman. She was absolutely beautiful. But she'd come and she'd stay in the barn with him. He had quarters at the end of the barn and had a bedroom in there. And it was not the kind of place you'd think anyone would want to go and visit. But his daughter came and stayed with him for a week every year.
Where did she come from? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Is any of the Pelly Neal family around at all? Do you know?
Not that I know of. I think that was the only. I think his daughter was all that he had.
Right.
And I don't remember anyone else other than her.
As being in charge of the farm, what would be his role?
Well, just take care of the horses and rent them, and keep the barn up, keep food in there for the horses, and
Right.
just like a typical farmer would do with his farm.
Right. Oh, wow. Any other characters that you recall hanging around the farm? From long
No,
term?
not really.
Yeah.
It was just our own little group there.
Right.
People came and rented horses, and Mike Hine and I would, well, when they'd rent a horse, they'd go up on the track, and Mike Hine and I would wait for somebody to get flipped, and then we'd go get the horse and ride it back to the barn. That was our weekend deal, usually on Sunday. Sunday morning was a busy day up there.
Right.
People were always getting flipped, and we'd have to run them. We didn't have to, we did it because we wanted to get a ride. And
Yeah, exactly. Then you'd ride it back to the barn?
ride it back to the barn, yeah.
What was the distance from the barn to the half mile?
Oh, it was only maybe 100 yards.
Okay, so it was close.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a spot. I can't remember when they tore that down. I think I was in the service when that was closed up and tore down.
You have a great recall of that whole time period.
Yeah, I've forgotten a lot of stuff though. We got talking. My mother had a lot of stuff. In fact, maybe you've seen it. The Parade magazine had quite an article on Jackson and his farm or his place in Virginia. And I know they had a picture of Renee Dare in there hooked up to a buggy.
Right.
And my mother had that somewhere, and she just passed away a couple months ago. She was 102.
All right, Golly.
And we're still going through her stuff, and so I wouldn't be surprised, but we'll come across that sometime, because I remember seeing it. It was a nice article, too.
This is terrific.
Yeah.
This is great. You added some insight into the...
Yeah, it's a little different approach to his career.
Exactly.
It was a little bit.
Well, for us, that's what we want to understand, the person.
Yeah.
You can read about his attorney generalship and the Supreme Court, that's public record, but what you bring...
They're always slanted.
Well,
And those articles are slanted in the direction, the professional direction.
that's right.
Which is, that's the way it should be as far as that goes. But my granddad knew him personally, and they were good buddies. Why then it's kind of interesting to recall some of that stuff.
Well, the letters are terrific.
Yeah.
Really great insight.
Yeah.
We really appreciate your taking the time today.
Well, that's all right. I'm enjoying it. It got us going after Lori. We found the letters that was in my mother's stuff,
Right.
and then I talked to Lori about it, and she said she would call you, and so then that got us going again. Well, we started looking around for more stuff, and
Sure.
but as I say, I think there's probably a lot more stuff in my mother's things that we eventually will run across, perhaps.
Well, it's terrific, and one of the things we're finding here at the Jackson Center is, like you, people had little vignettes of Jackson and their grandfather,
Yeah.
whether it was in Washington or in Lakewood or the boats. He had a boat.
Oh, he loved to fish.
Yeah.
When he retired, he'd spend his time on the lake in the summers after the horses.
Sure.
We had, my wife and I had horses after we were married, and that was before we built the house. And they were Tennessee walking horses. And my granddad, he took care of, well, you remember George Wilde.
Oh, sure.
He had a barn, and it's his niece that I'm married to.
I'll be there.
And my grandfather worked for him for a while, just as a sideline, taking care of the barn. And he had 2 or 3 horses in the barn. And that's how my granddad got involved in Tennessee walking horses. And I remember he was 76 years old, and we showed against each other in a show. With the small show, we'd go to Columbus, Pennsylvania, and Sugar Grove, just small time stuff. And we showed against each other. Each had a walking horse, and he beat me in that. And that just tickled the peanuts right out of him, you know. He got pinned second, I got pinned third in the class. And boy, he never forgot that. But he was 76 then.
Good for him. And
yeah, I haven't been on a horse in 40 years.
Right.
Got away from it, and my wife could never bring herself to go. We knew where the horses were when you had to sell them, but she could never bring herself to go see them because she was pretty attached to them.
Right. Well, and that was a time. I mean, I remember going and renting horses. We used to have horses at a place in Panama, but I don't know if you could rent a horse if you wanted to today.
There's, I guess, a couple places that do rent horses. Yeah, around the county someplace. But it's not a big business anymore, that's for sure.
This has been great, Vern.
I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much. And now it's part of the archives, and your letters are part of the archives, and they got the whole Vern Larson collection.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I was able to come down. It's getting to the point where there's not too many that can remember, things about him.
That's right. That's exactly right, and that's why it's important that I pause and
get all you can.
Well, you can, and it fills out the story.
Yeah. It's a little different from what most of the conversation is about Justice Jackson.
That's right.
I mean, not too many would refer to him as Rob.
No,
I've
never heard it. So and to see it in writing is terrific.
Yeah, well, that's what I was pleased of those, that he'd handwritten at least one of the letters.
Right.
And then Lori got a big kick out of reading it and finding some typos in there.
Well, I'm curious about the Faulkner one especially because that's...
Yeah, I was too.
He represented the village of Faulkner for a few years.
Yeah, being from Frewsburg, boy.
Yeah, so that's a strange spelling. I'll have to check on that one.
Yeah, that struck us right off the bat. I didn't remember those letters until we found them just recently.
Yeah.
That was kind of different.
Well, thanks so much, Vern.
Oh, you're certainly welcome.
And you were just talking about your grandfather's horse, Farmer Bob, and some of the tricks that he did. I'm going to ask you to repeat the one you just talked about where he actually worked off a chalkboard.
Well, he spent over a year teaching the horse to do that, and the horse could make letters on a chalkboard or on a blackboard with a special device that he had made for the horse's mouth that he could clamp down on that, and there was a piece of chalk in the end, and that's how he would write. And he could do any letters that were straight, sevens or a 4 or a 1. And my granddad would ask him, Bob, how much is 4 and 3? And it would depend on how he held the blackboard as to what number the horse would write. He had a certain little subtle way of slanting it one way or the other, and that was the horse's cue of what number he should write. And he had another trick that he had a half-moon shaped part of the stage. And in one side he had a cabinet, and there was a doll, some dolls in there. And the other side was, I don't know what he had, some of his props. But the horse would push a baby buggy over, reach in the cabinet, take a doll out, put it in the buggy, and then push the buggy back. And those were tricks that you don't normally see. He had another dual piano, and the horse would follow him. Play the piano. They play the national anthem on it, and it was remarkable. The horse was.
And would you watch the show? Where would he put on?
I was just a little kid. That was before my time, actually. Okay. I saw the horse after he had been retired. He was in a pasture down in Kane, Pennsylvania, and I can remember as a little boy going down there and seeing Bob and the horse. And my granddad, all he had to do was go up to the fence and whistle, and he'd come from wherever he was in the pasture. He'd come on the run.
I'll be darned.
But as I recall, he lived to be 28 years old, which is really old for a horse. He's the one that he had that I was telling you about, where he drove the horse around Sugar Grove without any reins on it,
Right.
and just used a whip as a prop, not to hit the horse, but to move the horse going left or right or straight ahead or stopping.
Purely directional.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What a great memory. Well, as I said before, Vern, this is terrific.
Well, I've enjoyed it, really. Reminiscing. It's always fun to reminisce, you know.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing the memories of Justice Jackson, horses, your grandfather. This is great. And my sense is you'll probably walk out here today saying, I forgot to mention this, you know?
Probably will.
And then we'll have to probably do this again.
Maybe we will. Okay, thanks, Greg.